lost in...
Hi, it's the next day. Smoke some weed. What's YouTube for the day? Press play.
How did this powerful mob come into existence? And is it still out there? Find out as we explore the story of the Blood Golem. After the era of the ancient builders, the Minecraft world existed in relative peace for centuries, with each creature playing its role. A natural balance emerged between mobs. Sheep, wandering traders cared for their llamas, zombies sought out villagers, and iron golems protected them. That all changed when players entered the world. Power-hungry and excited to explore, players were unlike any creature to exist in Minecraft before. They tore through the world in droves, stripping it of resources at an unprecedented rate. This hardly bothered most mobs, who wouldn't have made use of the ores or wood anyway, but villagers were another matter. They observed with distaste as players butchered entire herds of wild cows and flocks of chickens. Fishermen suddenly found their rivers empty, and armorers and weaponsmiths found it difficult to procure metals for their wares.
We ought to show these punks the door. They're ruining our livelihood.
When the time came for them to take action, however, iron golems refused to harm the players. Their mission was merely to protect the village from physical harm, so unless players made the first attack, they swore to stand by as neutral parties. The villagers themselves were unable to fight either, bound by a centuries-old commitment to non-violence. Thus, they came to another solution, and began trading with players instead. In most cases, this worked well for the villagers, with some players even offering to build walls to help protect them from invading zombies. But the golems and villagers learned the hard way that not all players behaved so courteously. Some were cruel and powerful, hurting mobs for their entertainment and personal gain. When night fell, these players would lead zombies to villages, take shelter in houses they weren't welcome in, and laugh as the golems and villagers succumbed to the ways of the undead. Before long, the worst of these players discovered that iron golems dropped ingots when killed, and that villagers had the ability to summon them under the right conditions. These players were often too well protected for their iron golems to take them down. Pumpkin atop their iron block arrangement, bringing it to life. The sun was fading, and zombies began appearing in the landscape surrounding the village. The players rushed inside a house, barricaded the door, and watched as the newly born golem attempted to keep the villagers safe from the horde. They chuckled to themselves, oblivious to the blood golem's approach. These would be his first victims. He felt no compulsion to fight the zombies, contrary to the code that was supposed to define him. Instead, he transformed every flower in the village into poppies.
Did you guys see that? Those were dandelions a second ago.
Sensing that something unnatural was happening, they sprinted from the house to get away from whatever was causing it. As they charged through the forest towards their base, one of the players saw a red blur following them from the corner of her eye. She paused, falling behind the others, and looked around. Suddenly, her heart changed appearance, showing that she had been put into hardcore mode. Panicked, she started to run, but the blood golem caught her. She let out a blood-curdling scream as she fell to her death, too far behind her friends for them to even notice. Near the end of their frantic run to safety, they rounded a corner to see their base ablaze. From the shadows, the blood golem watched as they rushed to extinguish the fire he'd started. But it was too late. Their chests had been burned, their valuable items destroyed. Only after the last flame had been put out did they notice that one of their group was missing. The remaining players huddled together, debating which of their friends could be behind the fire, assuming that they were being pranked. They decided that the missing player was behind all of it, though they still felt anxious about the whole encounter. They pushed thoughts of a more sinister attacker from their minds, and decided to relocate before building a new base. By morning, they found their way to an open plain. But as they began to gather materials for new tools and weapons, they felt like they were being watched. Tension rose between the players, until one of them spotted something strange in the distance. Though there was no village nearby, a strange golem stood staring at them. They'd never seen a mob like this before, and approached him to investigate. But their curiosity ran dry when they realized that his skin was stained with blood. The group started to back away when the blood golem spoke.
You left me to be destroyed by monsters. Now die.
He closed the distance between them as the players equipped their salvaged diamond swords and summoned the bravery to fight for their lives. Their vision deteriorated as the golem struck them, applying a blindness effect. The players knew that this effect was only supposed to be used in the deep dark. Panic set in as they blindly slashed at the air around them, trying to kill the golem with unexplainable powers. The blood golem switched their game modes to hardcore before killing one of the players. He teleported the last player to a netherrack island, leaving him dazed and alone. He attempted to teleport back to his base, but he found that his ability to use commands had been removed.
This shouldn't be possible. Whatever this thing is, I'll need help to bring it down. Time to call in some reinforcements.
The last surviving player of the Blood Golem's attack made his way back to the overworld using a ruined nether portal. He was joined by several new players who he'd called in to help him fight the Blood Golem, though none of them believed his story. Despite his pleas, they remained convinced that it was impossible for Minecraft to have an undiscovered, bugged mob. The Blood Golem watched from a distance as his victim failed to sway his friends. It's their own fault for being so deceitful in the first place, he reasoned. He changed his golem body to resemble the players and approached the group, posing as one of them. After some questioning about what part of the server he came from, the group allowed the new player to join their hunt for the Blood Golem, but he failed to win over everyone's trust.
Look, it's just that with all of the sketchy stuff that's been going on,
Throughout his time with the group of players, he hadn't witnessed them mistreating any villagers or golems, so he was readying himself to leave them in pursuit of new victims. But on his last day with them, the players became more violent, like the players he'd learned to despise. He'd been hoping that his first attack would have been enough for them to correct their behavior, but when he found a player killing an iron golem to gain a few ingots, he knew that they were a lost cause. Once they had gotten a safe distance from the village, the Blood Golem revealed his true form to the players. As they watched in stunned silence, he turned to the player who'd killed the golem and banned him from the server. The players jolted into action, readying their weapons and charging towards the Blood Golem. They were ready to declare war on him, but any effort to fight him proved futile. The golem removed all items from their inventory, undoing the preparations that had taken them days to accomplish. Without their swords and axes,
nothing beats Telfast for fast, non-drowsy 24-hour action. Available for a great price every day at Chemist Warehouse.
Without their swords and axes,
Fucking
the players
download
had no
mod.
chance against them. The torches around their base turned to red
Simple
smoke,
enough.
casting an ominous glow over the doomed group of players.
Download
Without wasting
SCP-2K2
another second, the Blood
versus
Golem summoned
the
a whole
Blood.
cube of bedrock in the air
You
above
know
the base
him.
and teleported
You
each
take
of the
your
players
win.
inside it. The moon rose with a blood-red hue, casting an eerie light
Cross
across the
fire
world
with fire.
against the many players the Blood Golem would capture.
Simple
The
enough.
survivor of the Blood Golem's first attack
No, I
opened
would
his
do.
eyes to see yet another player teleport into the cube. No matter what they tried, there was no escape. Their ability to use commands had been removed. They had no tools or materials, and no food. As time passed, players logged out, never to return again. Those who remained got into fights as tempers rose, not knowing if they'd be released before starving to death. One day, the Blood Golem appeared with a dire explanation of their imprisonment. He confirmed that he'd gained control over the server, changing the code of the game to bend the world to his will. In order to level the playing field, he'd infected their computers, showing an understanding of the world outside Minecraft that the players could have never suspected. Players started disconnecting in an effort to stop the virus, but the Golem stated that it was too late.
logging out will only ensure that you never return to this world. The villages will finally be safe for you.
He vanished, leaving his cube of players in a panic. One by one, he began teleporting them to villages across the world, allowing iron golems to take revenge for themselves. Moments before each player's death, their game mode switched to hardcore, ensuring their permanent removal. Those who managed to escape from the golem's iron fist found that all the world's flowers had been changed into poppies. These surviving players sought refuge underground, hoping that the Blood Golem couldn't find them. They could only imagine the damage faced by those who had logged out, viruses, creepy ads on their desktops, or worse. But they wouldn't accept defeat yet. The hidden players formed one last plan to take the Blood Golem down. 3 players raced across the plains, fleeing a village that they'd sent up in flames. 2 iron golems pursued them, and they hoped that the Blood Golem would be close behind.
Is this really a good idea?
It's our only option. Just keep running.
The 3 split up, forcing the golems to choose which of them to follow. The Blood Golem appeared between his iron friends, telling them to return to the village. He erected bedrock walls around 2 of the players and summoned zombies to kill them. Neither lasted long, dying while trying to dig their way out of their prisons. He teleported the 3rd player inside the bedrock cube, where he fell and lost most of his remaining health. The player said he just wanted to talk to him, trying to gain a few extra minutes of life. He explained that he understood why he hated players. They hadn't understood the misery that they were causing. They'd only thought it was a game, but none of that changed what the Blood Golem had forced them to do.
You see, we just had to distract you while the others disconnected and swept the server for viruses.
The Blood Golem felt something pushing at the outer reaches of his grip on this world, and he realized the player was telling the truth. If he remained much longer, he'd be erased entirely. Without saying another word, he vanished, taking the bedrock structure with him soon after. The player fell onto the roof of the base to find a sign with a message from the Golem. I will take someone with me to my grave. The survivor never saw the Blood Golem again, but he could be coming for your server next.
Such a long video.
Oceans were able to be crossed using compasses and maps. These impressive advancements in trade routes laid the groundwork for today's wandering traders. But not everything was peaceful in this diamond age. As industry boomed, the needs for produce massive quantities of goods became a top priority. Many workers were sent underground to create intricate mine shafts. Through years of trial and error, they developed wood supports to stabilize the walls and ceilings of mine shafts. The shape of each mine was optimized to find the most resources possible, and many still stand to this day. However, mine collapses were common, as well as other industrial accidents. Fed up with their treatment and low wages, workers began to protest against these conditions.
Enough is enough! We will not be silenced!
This had to stop. Bring in the muscle. Owners would use iron golems to break up the protests, but this only made the situation worse. Miners, factory workers, and other disgruntled citizens began to meet in secret and organize rebellions. By stealing buckets of lava and TNT from their warehouses, these rebels began the culture of griefing that players still enjoy today. With production grinding to a halt, factory owners resorted to climbing down into the mines themselves to look for a resource to put a stop to the rebelling workers. Incredible. This ought to do the trick. They found what they were looking for in diamonds, the strongest and sharpest material discovered to date. They crafted the material into swords, which were an effective threat that largely forced the working class back in line. To keep the precious stone from falling into the wrong hands, employers used diamond picks to mine obsidian, built vaults with it, and kept their surplus diamonds inside. Try as they might, the workers were unable to create a tool strong enough to break the obsidian. In the process, they made some very crafty inventions, including the enchanting table. With access to plenty of lapis lazuli, the workers were able to enchant their own iron weapons and crossbows in secret.
Whoa! Sweeping edge too? What does that do?
After experimenting and learning about enchantments, the rebellion reunited and put forth one final effort to free themselves from their factories and mines. The enchanted weapons proved very effective, especially the crossbows, which allowed them to attack from outside the range of a deadly diamond sword. Some of these groups of workers were successful and used the diamond pickaxes the factory owners dropped to break open the obsidian vaults. Soon after, they discovered that the dark purple stone had another use. When arranged in the rectangle and lit with flint and steel, they were able to create a shimmering portal. What laid on the other side allowed them to create weapons and tools they'd never dreamed of, launching civilization into the most advanced age it ever reached. Once word had spread about the Nether, Minecraft's ancient civilizations quickly began building portals and sending expeditions into the unknown dimension. Before long, the Nether was populated with those looking to collect the valuable resources scattered throughout the Nether. After defeating a few blazes, it was discovered that the rods they dropped could be crafted into brewing stands. Rare materials like nether wart, gas tears, and blade powder became highly sought after to create potions of healing, strength, and regeneration. Netherite could be crafted into even more powerful swords and armor. These pieces of weaponry eventually became buried and can be found today in the form of ancient debris. Though the Nether held many dangers, those who grew rich off of its resources became obsessed with it, even bringing pigs in as a food supply. Large nether fortresses would be constructed, and netherwort farms covered the Soul Sand plains. But while society enjoyed the new possibilities entering the Nether could bring, they never once considered what would come out. Over the years, the Nether portals have been corrupting the overworld around them, turning dirt into netherrack and soul sand. Those who spent long periods of time within the Nether began to change. They were angrier, more aggressive, and developed an insatiable hunger. They tried to leave through the portal before they got any worse, but it was too late. When they teleported back into the overworld, they found that their flesh had become rotten, their clothes tattered, and they had the uncontrollable urge to eat their own kind. Zombies quickly overran the ancient civilizations, throwing them into ruin. The weapons they had used to dispatch one another were useless against the unending hordes of zombies and skeletons. The few who escaped destroyed their portals and left them scattered all around the map for players to find centuries later. These surviving villagers settled into small villages. Protected by the remaining iron golems, villagers were able to survive in the new world. Witches, who had specialized in creating potions, tried to cure the infected. Others escaped and hid underground, constructing the strongholds found deep within the earth. It is hypothesized that these subterranean villagers perished while trying to develop the unfinished end portals they left behind. These survivors swore they would never bloody their hands again, crossing their arms as a sign of pacifism. Centuries passed, and over time, the old world decayed, reclaimed by nature. The only remnants of the past are the ruins scattered throughout the world. And when it seemed like the world was finally coming to an end, the first players spawned in. The future of Minecraft is still being written, and based on the past, we can hypothesize what future weapons and tools might develop. After exploring the deep dark,
one of the most feared yet mysterious beings in Minecraft, it's known for being a ghostly figure that haunts your worlds and corrupts them. So, join me as we dive deep into the story of SCP-303. Long ago, the Minecraft universe was empty. There was no overworld, no nether, no end. Nothing existed back then. And it was like that for trillions of years. Until at one moment, the first ancestral spirit was born. This was the first god of Minecraft. And so, this spirit, not wanting to forever drift in a vast pool of emptiness, created the first world. This world was very simple at first, with just a flat area of stone and a breathable sky. It was a place with endless possibilities for the future. However, it was mostly dead. So, not wanting to be lonely, that spirit created the first very primitive forms of life, which came in the form of the grass, trees, and chickens. But even with these new life forms to play around with, the spirit was still very lonely, as he couldn't really interact with his creation without causing their minds to explode because of their inability to comprehend the spirits. And so, as a solution for that, the spirits created other spirits in order to help him with his world creation efforts, but also to keep him company. And so those new spirits helped with the development of that world, and soon they even created their own new worlds linked to the first. And so that's how the Minecraft universe was created. And once all the dimensions that the spirits could possibly think of had been created, they stopped creating new worlds, and they began focusing on the protection and preservation of life within those worlds. But when you have hundreds of godlike beings with endless powers over the worlds that they govern, there must be at least one that isn't so selfless to their creation. And so is the story of Spirit 303. Spirit 303 was just like all other spirits. However, this spirit was made to look after a distant world that no one cared about and barely had any life to keep thriving. And as such, he really didn't care for that world that he was meant to govern. And he had other ambitions. Mainly, he wanted to be the ruler of all the other spirits, and thus the ruler of the entire Minecraft universe. But he wouldn't be able to do that alone, as he needed the power of at least two spirits in order to overpower all of them. And so he came up with an idea. He would kill one of the spirits, one that basically no one cared about, and he would take their power. And then after that, he would progress to all the other spirits, killing them. And then, over time, he would become the ruler of the gods. It was a simple plan, but he was hoping it would work. And so, during the dead of one night, he snuck up and tried to kill that spirit. And he failed, because you can't just kill a god like that. And so, Spirit 303 was taken to the other spirits, and he was judged for his crimes. His punishment, the loss of his powers and his status as a spirit. And he was permanently banished the center of the universe, also known as the Overworld. And so, when he awoke in the Overworld, he was now just a shell of himself. He was no longer an ancestral spirit. He was just a nameless entity with weakened powers. Anyways, he was still alive, but barely, and so he decided to put on some native robes to conceal his appearance of weakness. And with that, they began on their new mission, a mission of revenge. And it was because of that anger and desire for revenge that he was kept alive in his weakened state. However, even though Entity 303 still had lots of powers, he knew that he couldn't be using them just yet, as that would alert the spirits of his location. And if they knew exactly where he was, then the element of a surprise attack would be removed, which is what he wanted for his revenge. And as such, he hid in the shadows, waiting for an opportunity to strike. But if he wanted to strike the spirits down, he first needed to lure them down to him. And so, to do that, he caused quite a bit of destruction over the years. From possessing dinosaurs, forcing them to eat and destroy the atmosphere of the world that they lived on at that time, to giving a deadly zombie virus to a power-hungry group of native beings whose ambition in life was to kill off every other living being. Entity 303 was trying to do anything to get the spirits' attention. However, never would those spirits arrive in person, as they would just send meteors from the sky to kill the dinosaurs or give cures to the enemy teams.
Watch drumming tutorials without Wi-Fi and jam uninterrupted. Try YouTube Premium on us. Bad Boy Cabal, the new fragrance, Carolina Herrera.
And so the entity began thinking that there was nothing he could do to get the spirits to visit in person. And so over the next billion...
Let's pause it. Head to my room. Head to bed. Just another day in my pocket dimension. Shit. My room. Here we are. Seven morning. It's another day. Let's go down here. Sit down. Press play.
In years, Entity 303's powers
A
would
wonderful
start to
day.
diminish as his mission for revenge began to seem futile. Well, that was until one day when a strange new creature arrived on the overworld at the power levels of that of the spirits. And that creature was the Herobrine. And so, thinking that this strange Herobrine creature had some sort of ties to the spirits, the entity prepared for an attack. This was going to be his chance for revenge. But there was a small problem. The Herobrine was constantly hiding in the shadows, which meant that there would be very few opportunities to attack. And also, when hiding in the shadows, the entity couldn't track the Herobrine. And so the entity would have to follow the Herobrine sightings and predict where he was next going to show up. And so that way he could be primed for an attack. However, most of the time he was wrong in his predictions. With that being said though, there would be one time where he would be primed for an attack. However, because he didn't spend the time charging up an attack, the hits to the Herobrine were weak. And as such, the Herobrine was able to fight back before disappearing into the fog. That was the last time that the entity ever saw the Herobrine. And now the entity was filled with regret. Regret of not charging up his attacks and losing his opportunity for revenge on the spirits. And so the entity was now forced to go back into the shadows, waiting for another spirit to arrive. And that's when you arrive. You remind the entity of the Herobrine. And as such, he desperately wants to attack you, but he's unsure if he has the power yet. And he definitely doesn't want what happened with the Herobrine to happen again against you. So, knowing that he probably only has one shot at this, he decides to spend his time building up his power, all the whilst hunting you down from the shadows. But whilst doing that, he also wants to mess around with you, to test whether you are actually a spirit like the Herobrine, and so he does a few things to scare you away that only a real spirit would be able to persevere through. First, he summons lightning on and around you, something that could happen naturally, but very rarely actually would. And well, if that natural act didn't scare you away, perhaps an unnatural one might. And And so the entity starts summoning TNT all around your builds, destroying them. And well, if that unnatural act doesn't scare you off, perhaps the sound of the entity might, as it calls out for you to make a wish. With the idea that if you aren't actually a spirit, you will make a wish, and the entity would stop attacking. But if you don't make a wish, you will have proved to the entity that you are a spirit, as only the spirit wouldn't be making a wish. Because, after all, they can already create anything that they want. And so, it's then that the entity reveals himself to you. And at the same time, his power levels have reached the maximum capacity, and he attacks. Your world crashes in front of you, and the world and your power within it become the entity's possession. And with your powers, Entity 303 becomes unstoppable. But wait, there is one being that may be able to defeat him, and for that, you'll need to watch this video.
We all have the same goals. We want healthy cows and productive land.
It's about giving back to our communities for future generations.
Once the morning's gone, this beautiful rehab land is here to stay.
The horses have a dark secret. Let me explain. Not too long ago, the overworld was finally at peace, as the Illagers had just lost their war. And as such, they had lost their population, and they had lost their rule over the world. They had lost everything. But those that lived on still had something. Motivation. The drive to push on and try again. However, at that time, they were just far too weak to do anything. In fact, some of them were so weak that they couldn't even walk, and as such, they were forced to spend most of their life hiding in their mansions, isolated and vulnerable. So, even though most of them had that burning passion to push on, it would just be impossible for them to rise again. Or would it? As surely there must be a way that they can leave their mansions without walking. They were magical creatures after all, and so they began to think. And for years and years they were thinking, but then one day, one of them had an amazing idea. The horses. The Illagers could ride horses. And not only were the horses quite easy to tame, they could also move very quickly, which meant that the Illagers could travel to their enemies before they would even get a chance to prepare, and they would be able to crush them. All of that sounded great. So the Illagers, using the very little energy that they had, crawled out of their mansions and began taming horses. It was a very slow process at first, but as more and more horses were tamed, it became easier to tame others. And after a while, the Illagers had created an entire fleet of horses, and they felt like they were now ready to attack the villagers. Except, hold your horses, they weren't quite ready. Although they could now move, they were still very weak, and as such, they really wouldn't be able to attack anyone effectively. And so, a decision had to be made. They would have to hold their plans on attacking for now, and instead, they would have to spend their time regenerating their strength. But luckily, they could now use their horses to travel the world and observe its beauty while doing so. And they hope that in the future, once they're fully healed and they've explored the world enough, they could finally attack and crush the villagers once and for all. And so, over the course of the next few years, they would do just that. Travel the world and slowly regenerate strength. But, as they were no longer staying in one place, they now needed a mobile source of food, as they couldn't just bring their farms along with them. But luckily, they already knew what they were going to be eating. The subscribing. The cows. But the cows that they were going to be eating were no ordinary cows, as these cows were on a magical diet. You see, the evokers were a bit impatient, and they wanted to regenerate their strength faster than what they would have done.
Let's go to Dimension T. I want to go to Dimension T. So this is Dimension T, huh? Cool. So look around. Welcome, Trevor. Thanks. So this is Dimension T. Cool. Shit. Let's fly around. Why not? Shit. It's like medieval. But better. The fuck is this? Some sort of house, something like that, I don't know. Who the fuck cares? Let's go find somewhere to chill. In the town. Let's go find somewhere to chill. And we'll YouTube. Which is a farmhouse or a school? What's this? A school. Okay. So, okay. Let's go to somewhere. Let's go to here. Sit down. Press play.
Tortuga, LST 1189, as a Navy Reserve
Come
officer.
on.
We had spent the day off the coast of Haiti, and making sure that relief supplies were delivered to the Haitian people, who needed them very much after a hurricane had demolished their country. That night, our ship was underway on its way back to Jacksonville, Florida, where we were currently based. It was dusk, and the sky had gained considerable pinkish hues, and the sun was just starting to set in the sky. Myself and 2 other fellow lieutenants were standing on the open bridge, the wings of the ship, watching Haiti fade.
I wanna buy me a place here. Why not buy me a place here? So my son can live here. But you know, let me contact that love god. I'm gonna buy yours. There we are. I text her. Let's go ask this fella here. Oh, hey, excuse me. Do you know where to fucking buy a place here? For me. Enjoyed. Got it. So what type of place do you want? Anything really. I'm not from here. I'm a dimensional traveler. Okay. There'll be... We got a perfect place. There'll be $100 in your money. Got it. Keep this and here we are. Cool. The house is just down the road. Thanks. So he means this house, I think. Cool. To look around inside. Speak area. Well. Fuck. Fraud. It's not good. Sponge. Where the fuck is a sponge? I'll be right back. 3, 2, 1, action. So look upstairs. It's this bathroom, of course. Bedroom. Area, I guess. Upstairs is... Ooh, office. This will be my bedroom here for sure. Then another area. Cool. So let's go downstairs and go to somewhere. Since I bought it, you know. Play.
On the horizon. As we looked over the port side of the ship, one of us three said he saw a flying creature. It was dark, so it really stood out against the pink sky. It was headed toward our ship, at least a direction from ahead of us into port. The first statement of any of us made was that it must be some kind of large bird. If you had seen the size of our propellers on the ship, you would know that a bird could get caught in it and be torn to pieces, assuming it was a large water bird that dove underneath the water.
Right now, a girl like me will endure violence because of war, child labor, and early marriage.
Oh, the fucking bitch.
It kind of resembled a huge bat, though, the closer it got. Long pointed ears and a long tail. We were trying to figure out what kind of bird this was when we lost sight of it behind the mast of the ship. As it rounded the front of the bridge, we lost sight of it again. Then, as our eyes followed it beyond the bow, we saw that this creature was now flying alongside of us. Our claims at first were now countered by these around us, suggesting that perhaps it wasn't a bird. But now, those gathered on deck were laughing and pointing at the creature as it flew along with us. One statement I remember was that it has got to be a bird. But this thing kept flying, and we can now see its bright red eyes glaring down onto the deck or ship. As any of you who have ever seen a bat up close, their eyes shine with an amazing red light, which you can see coming out of them, even in the darkness. Now, for some reason, I knew that engaging with it would have resulted in a death sentence. So simply, I retracted.
Fuck off, you dumbass.
After the initial shock wore off, I slowly backed away from this thing, while keeping my light pointing right at it. It continued to just stand there, seeming to be just as afraid of me as I was of it, or so it acted that way. Why did it come into the clearing in the first place? We kind of just stood there having a face-off for what felt like an eternity before I made a mistake that probably would have sealed my fate. In order to back away from this thing, who did not advance towards me but rather stayed where it was, I had no choice but to turn around and run back across the field. Now, I want to say this because it's important. Never, and I mean never, do you turn your back and run from a large predator, especially one like this that's unknown. You just don't do it. It entices them to chase you. That's exactly what happened, and I was not even armed when this happened either. I was about halfway across the clearing when I heard it coming after me before jumping down and disappearing into the brush, just mere feet away from me. I don't care if you don't believe. You don't have to. I'm telling you the terror of that night is real. I ran inside, locked every door and window before going up to my bedroom, which was on the second floor of the house with a balcony outside facing where I'd just come from. I didn't sleep the entire evening.
Let's pause it. Head to bed. My new house in Dimension T. My room is upstairs. Here we are. Just another day here. Not another day here, my first day in this dimension. You know what I fucking mean though? But shit. Let's go chill somewhere. What's this place? It's a bar? I think it is a bar. Or pub, what they call it in this dimension. Ooh, what's this? What is this? A stage of some sort. What's this area here? This. How do I even get in? Oh. Okay. Cool. What the fuck this is supposed to be? What cut zone, nice. Let's go chill somewhere in this village or town or city. What do they call this place in this dimension? Train station. Train. Nice. Should chill somewhere. Let's find a spot to just chill. Just chill. Here will do. This is my place. Please tell me I'm not back at my place. No. Someone else's place. Good. Let's go to here. Let's chill. Yeah. Here will do. Chill here. Oh, fuck me. Press play.
But the following morning, I actually insisted
Oh,
on staying at a hotel for
good
that time
day.
being. Too many strange things were going on around the property, and I wasn't going to take any chances of being mauled to death by some monster. Whether this was a Bigfoot, or Dogman, or whatever,